The automatic doors of Greenwell Pharmacy slid open with a soft chime, and Kesha Williams, 17 years old, sharp-eyed, calm, and confident, stepped inside. She was here for something simple, ibuprofen for her grandmother's aching joints, nothing more, nothing less. Yet fate had decided that this day would not be simple. Not gentle. Not fair. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and peppermint. Shelves towered around her, filled with medicine, vitamins, bandages, and diabetic kits. Normal things? Harmless things. She moved slowly through the aisle, glancing at labels with quiet focus, dosage, side effects, ingredients. The kind of careful attention her grandmother had always admired in her dot, but on the other side of that aisle stood a man whose eyes didn't see attention to detail. They saw suspicion, officer. James Thompson, 12 years in the Chicago Police Department. A man whose uniform gave him more confidence than compassion. A man who believed authority was something to wield, not something to respect. He watched Kesha like a predator sizing up prey, and then the moment that would change everything arrived. He stepped forward, hard, heavy, boots echoing through the aisle. "Hey, you," he barked. Kesha turned, confused. "Me? Don't play smart. What are you doing back here? Show me what you got in your bag." The pharmacist looked up in surprise. A few customers paused mid-conversation. Phone slowly lifted, recording, always recording. Kesha blinked once, steady and unfazed. "Officer, I'm buying medicine, ibuprofen, for my grandmother." Her voice was calm. But calmness only irritated Thompson more. He stepped closer. Too close. "Open your bag." She refused, not rudely, not aggressively, but firmly. Firm in a way he wasn't used to, and ego is a dangerous fuel dot in one sudden motion. Thompson grabbed her arm, slamming her against the shelf. Bottles of cold syrup crashed to the floor, exploding like tiny glass grenades. Liquid pooled across the aisle. Gasps filled the room. The man didn't stop. Handcuffs clicked. Tight. Too tight. Pain shot up her wrist. Still, she did not scream. Instead, she stared at him with eyes that held fire and intelligence. Eyes that unnerved him far more than her silence. "Get your hands off me, you animal." The words left her lips like iron, unshaking, unbroken. Customers raised phones higher. Some whispered. Some trembled. Some, especially the younger black women, watched with pain in their eyes, because they had witnessed scenes like this before. Officer Thompson smirked. "Shut up. You know exactly why you're being arrested?" He tightened the cuffs again. Unnecessary force, intentional humiliation, the kind that leaves bruises, not just on skin, but on dignity. Kesha stood straight, even with her wrists trapped. "Officer Thompson," she said quietly, dangerously quiet. "Are you sure you want to do this?" That question should have made him pause. Any wise man would have felt the storm forming behind her tone. But Thompson wasn't wise. He was powerful, or believed he was, and belief can be deadly. Threatening an officer? He scoffed. "That'll look great on your record, princess." A cruel smile sliced across his face. A smile he would later regret for the rest of his life. The pharmacist stepped forward, voice trembling. "Officer, she didn't steal anything. I watched her. She only picked up pain relievers." Thompson snapped around like a dog baring teeth. "Get back to work." The pharmacist froze. Customers watched, recording everything in silent, heavy outrage. And yet Kesha didn't tremble. Didn't plead because she was counting every word, every protocol, violation. Every mistake like chess pieces on a board. And Thompson didn't even know he was playing. He dragged her outside. Cameras still pointed at them like witness eyes. Sirens weren't needed, but he turned them on anyway. Not for safety, for spectacle, for ego. Kesha sat in the back of the patrol car, cuffs digging into her skin. Chicago blurred past the window. Lights, people, traffic, all of it moving while her life seemed frozen. Not from fear, but from calculation, because unlike Thompson, she understood the system. She had been raised inside it. By a man who built it. By a man who commanded it. And Thompson was about to learn that. He chuckled darkly from the front seat, adjusting the mirror so he could look at her. "Your daddy's going to be real proud." His little girl caught dealing drugs. Silence. Then a slow inhale, measured, controlled. He pushed further. Maybe it runs in the family, huh? Still Keisha said nothing, because silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation. She studied him the entire ride, like a scientist studying a specimen. Not angry, clinical. Not afraid, focused, every insult filed away, every accusation documented in memory. Every second. One step closer to the moment everything would flip. When they reached the precinct, officers greeted Thompson with laughs and applause. He paraded her through the hallway like a trophy, but trophies don't stare back with knowing eyes, and some officers paused. Brows furrowed. Faces softened with confusion. They recognized her. Not from the news. Not from the streets, but from inside this building. Kesha had walked these halls as a child, hand in hand with the very man Thompson answered to, the man who signed his evaluations, the man who could end his career. The man whose last name she carried, but Thompson didn't see it, not yet, and that ignorance was the beginning of the end. Officer Martinez was the first to hesitate. Her voice wavered. Thompson? Where have I seen this girl before? Thompson brushed past her like she was an inconvenience. Just another trafficker. Just another trafficker. Words that echoed like poison. Inside the processing room, Thompson began paperwork, confident, careless. Blind, full name, she answered calmly. Keisha Williams. A simple name, but a bomb waiting to explode. Not yet. Soon. She gave a false address, not to hide, but to buy time, because timing wins wars. And this was war. Parents' occupation? Thompson asked. She smiled, subtly, dangerously. My mother works in the judicial system. My father also works in law enforcement. He laughed. Mocking. Arrogant. Ignorant. Let me guess. Public defenders, social workers, people who love protecting criminals. Kesha's eyes gleamed. Something like that. Behind them, officers gathered, drawn in by tension they didn't yet understand. One of them whispered, "She talks like someone trained around cops." Another answered quietly, "No, she talks like someone raised by one." And somewhere deep inside this station, a storm was already forming. A storm named truth. A storm named justice. A storm named Keisha Williams. Daniel lay awake long after the lights were out, staring at the ceiling, counting the patterns he'd memorized to help the fear stay small. Every night had been the same, silence like a trap, footsteps like thunder. But tonight, something was different. He didn't know what, only that a shift had stirred like wind before a coming storm. He thought about the world outside the walls of the mansion, the way sunlight felt warm instead of sharp, the way laughter in the streets had sounded free. He had almost forgotten freedom had a sound. For so long he had been told he was lucky to live here, fed, clothed, owned. But deep inside, a voice had begun whispering louder than the fear. This is not how life is meant to be. You are not theirs to break. The next morning, Victoria's husband left for a business trip, and the house became quieter. Stillness had always frightened Daniel. It was the calm before lessons, punishments, endless chores. But today it felt like breathing space. The other workers avoided looking at him, guilt wrinkling their eyes, fear chaining their voices. Yet one woman, the maid Elena, hesitated at the doorway while he scrubbed the staircase. She knelt to help him with the bucket even though she could be fired for it. "You're not alone, Mignona," she whispered, voice trembling. "One day this house will not hold you." Daniel froze. No one had ever spoken words like that to him, words of possibility. Something inside him rose like someone opening a window in his chest. That night he heard whispers through the vent, Elena's voice, another man's, plans spoken quietly like prayers. A phone number, a place to run, a chance for the first time. Daniel did not feel like a shadow in someone's life. He felt like a boy preparing to take his first step toward escape, and this time, he believed he could. Sleep didn't come to Daniel that night. Instead, he lay curled beneath his thin blanket, repeating the phone number Elena whispered as if it were a lifeline. Hope was a dangerous thing in that mansion, but it warmed him more than any blanket ever had. When morning came, he moved through chores with new purpose, eyes sharper, breath steadier. He began to notice things he had ignored before. Keys left on counters, the gardener's gate unlatched. The delivery truck arriving every Thursday, pieces, paths, doors, the world beyond the mansion no longer felt like a dream. It felt like a plan forming in his hands. Days passed like slow-moving clouds, heavy and full of storm. Daniel worked quietly, but his mind stayed alive, awake, building maps no one could see. Every polished floor became a route. Every locked door became a challenge. Every moment of silence, a preparation. He kept Elena's whisper inside him like treasure. "You are not alone." Those words changed how he walked, how he breathed. He no longer looked only at the ground. Sometimes, when no one noticed, he looked toward the windows, toward sky. That sky felt like a promise. One afternoon, Victoria hosted wealthy guests in the grand hall, glasses clinking like sharp little bells, laughter dripping with the kind of carelessness only the powerful could afford. Daniel moved around them with a tray, small and invisible as always, but today he listened closely. He watched the guards, counted footsteps, noticed when they left the room. When they returned, he memorized everything. Later, in the laundry room, Elena slipped him a folded paper hidden beneath towels. No one else saw. No one else even looked. She kept her hands steady, but her voice shook just slightly. 3 days, she whispered. A man will wait by the back gate at midnight. You must be ready. Daniel swallowed. 3 days. His heart thudded like footsteps on marble. He spent those days preparing in silence. He saved crumbs of food carefully, wrapping them in cloth. He tied sheets together nights before, testing knots with small shaking hands. He found the gardener's forgotten gloves, too big for him but warm. Hope made him brave, but the mansion was not blind. Victoria watched everything, even when Daniel wasn't looking. She noticed small changes, the way he moved quicker, quieter, how his eyes no longer looked defeated. She was used to obedience, not Spark. And Spark frightened people like her. One evening, she called him into the study. "Daniel," she said slowly, fingers tapping the polished desk. "You've been different." He felt the room shrink. His pulse roared in his ears, a warning, a scream. But he kept his voice small and steady. "I'm just working, ma'am." Like always. She studied him like glass she wanted to crack. The silence stretched, tight, heavy. Then she turned away, dismissing him with a wave. But Daniel knew then, she sensed it, he had to move. Not in 3 days, sooner that night. While everyone slept, he stood by the window, breathing the cold air through a tiny gap. He repeated the phone number again and again until it lived in him like his own name. The house that once swallowed him now felt like walls he could push against. He held the doorknob to the hallway. Not yet, but soon, very soon, he would run. On the second night, Elena smuggled him a small piece of paper wrapped inside a slice of bread. Daniel unfolded it beneath his blanket, his hands shaking with caution and hope. A map, rough lines drawn in pencil, the mansion layout, exits, blind camera spots. The back gate where freedom waited like sunrise dot at the bottom. One sentence. Tomorrow, midnight. Daniel's breath hitched. Tomorrow. Not 3 days. Tomorrow. Faster, closer, real. He folded the map like it was made of gold and pressed it to his chest. For the first time in years, sleep didn't frighten him, it fueled him. He would need strength. The day before ESCAP, the next morning, stretched like a lifetime. Every hour passed in slow motion, heavy with nerves. Daniel scrubbed floors, polished glass, dusted the chandelier, but every task felt like the last time he would ever do it. He moved with a calm face, but his heartbeat hammered like fists against walls. Victoria crossed the hall during lunch and her gaze locked onto him. Sharp, suspicious. "Victoria, you're quiet today, Daniel." He bowed slightly, keeping his voice steady. "Daniel, yes ma'am. Just tired." Her eyes narrowed. She sensed something, she always sensed something. But she let him walk away. Elena found him later in the storage room. No words. She only touched his shoulder once, quick, firm, a message that said, "Be brave." It was the first gentle touch he'd felt in months. The final HOURS night fell slowly, like the world was holding its breath. Daniel packed everything he owned: a shirt, a piece of bread, the gardener's gloves, a pencil, the map. It all fit in a small cloth bundle. He stood at the edge of his bed. He looked around the tiny room that had held his fear, his tears, his childhood. He whispered to the empty walls, "This is not my life anymore." Midnight approached. The house slept. Daniel didn't. He crept into the hallway, barefoot and silent as wind. Every sound felt loud, even his breathing. He counted steps: 5 to the stairwell, 6 to the corridor, 8 to the laundry door. He moved like water, flowing through darkness. Following the map burned into his memory. From the end of the hallway, he could see it: the back door. The gate beyond it. The world beyond that. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was close enough to touch. He swallowed, stepped forward. And the floorboard creaked, a sound too small for day, but too loud for night. A voice pierced the silence behind him. "Daniel?" Everything froze. Daniel turned slowly, heart racing like thunder trapped in his ribs. In the dim hallway stood Mr. Whitmore's niece, Clara, 13, quiet, often invisible like him. She stared at him, eyes wide, confused but not angry. Clara, whispering, "Why are you awake?" Daniel swallowed hard, searching for a lie, something harmless. "Daniel, I couldn't sleep. Just needed air." She stepped closer, candle flickering in her hand. Her face softened when she noticed the bundle at his side, the truth too visible to hide. "Clara, you're leaving." Not accusation. Not threat. Just understanding. Daniel nodded once. He expected her to scream, call guards, run to wake Victoria, but instead she looked over her shoulder, then back at him with a strange sadness. "Clara, I would leave too if I could." He didn't know what to say. Clara lived rich, free, admired, yet her voice carried chains of its own. She handed him the candle. "Clara, this will help. Just go before they see you." For a second, Daniel saw himself through her eyes. Not a servant, not property, but a boy who deserved to run. He whispered a trembling thank you and slipped past her. His feet touched the hallway tile like it was ice. He reached the laundry door, the one he'd planned to use, but a shadow moved beyond the window, a guard smoking under the porch light. Too risky. So he changed the plan. He turned toward the pantry instead, using the narrow servant tunnel. It was dark as a cave, spiders threading corners, cold air breathing through cracks. Every step felt like walking inside his own heartbeat, fast, loud, alive. The bundle weighed almost nothing, yet every item inside meant survival. At the tunnel's end, he reached the kitchen, empty, but fresh footprints marked the floor. Someone had been there minutes ago. Daniel crouched behind the counter, listening. Voices murmured from the dining room. He held his breath. 5 seconds, 10, 20, footsteps retreated. Daniel opened the back latch as silently as a prayer, squeezing through the tiniest gap. Outside, the wind touched his skin like freedom, whispering hello. He ducked beneath the porch railing and crawled through wet grass, clutching the map with trembling fingers. The moonlight guided him toward the tall fence, the gate to escape. Somewhere beyond it, a man waited. Every second forward was a second closer to a new life. He was almost there, almost. One more breath, one more step. And then a spotlight burst across the yard. The night was no longer quiet. Daniel ran. Daniel ran the way only someone desperate for freedom could run, feet slicing through wet grass, lungs burning like fire, heart hammering fast enough to break. The guard shouted behind him, radio crackling with alarm. More lights flicked on. Doors slammed. The mansion woke like a beast disturbed, but Daniel had already crossed half the yard. The gate stood ahead, metal cold and tall under the moon. Beyond it, at the dirt road, a figure waited, coat long, hands in pockets, head turning sharply toward the sound of Daniel's footsteps. This was the man Elena had promised, the man who helped children disappear from places like this. Daniel didn't stop to think. Didn't dare look back. The spotlight swept over him, harsh, blinding, and a voice thundered, "Stop!" His breath tore from him in short, broken bursts. He reached the fence, fingers gripping metal hard enough to cut skin. The gate chain glinted, locked. His stomach dropped. The guard was closing in. Fast. Daniel turned, eyes wide, panic clawing his throat, but the man on the road stepped forward just as silently as moonlight. He raised a tool, long and thin. Metal clicked. The lock fell open. No hesitation. Daniel pushed through, stumbling onto the road. The man grabbed his arm, steadying him. Man, low, urgent. Do you want out? Truly out? Daniel nodded so hard it hurt. Sirens began to wail from inside the house. The man pulled him into the trees, shadows swallowing them whole. Branches scratched, roots twisted underfoot, but Daniel didn't let go. He couldn't. Freedom brushed his skin like wind, close enough to taste, behind them. Angry shouts spread across the yard like wildfire, but ahead, only darkness, open and alive. For the first time, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward something, toward a life that belonged to him, toward sky, toward possibility, toward tomorrow. Branches snapped under Daniel's feet as he followed the stranger deeper into the woods. The night swallowed sound, but behind them the mansion's alarm screamed like dying metal. Searchlights swept between trees, dogs barking somewhere distant. Daniel didn't dare breathe too loudly. One mistake and everything would end. The stranger moved swiftly, quiet as shadow. Man, they won't follow far. They want control, not chase. Stay close. Daniel nodded, though fear shook his bones. Hours felt like minutes. The woods thinned, revealing a dirt road stretching into darkness like a path no one had walked in years. A rusty truck waited under a dead street lamp. The man opened the passenger door. Man, get in. We drive until morning. Daniel hesitated, small, tired, scared, but courage didn't mean not being afraid. Courage meant stepping forward anyway. He climbed in. The truck engine coughed awake, headlights slicing through mist. The mansion shrank behind them, alarms fading into memory. Daniel pressed his forehead to the window, watching the world move, trees, moonlight, open space, things he'd only dreamed of. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the man's steady voice. Man, my name is Raphael. Elena trusted me. She risked everything. We'll keep you safe now, Daniel whispered the first question that mattered. Daniel, what happens to me now? Raphael looked at him, not with pity, but respect. Raphael, you start again. School, home, choice? A life with no chains. The words landed like sunrise. Daniel felt something break, not pain, but release, as if heavy doors inside him finally opened. Months later, Daniel sat by a window in a small apartment, warm light on his face. Books beside him, a backpack ready for school. No guards, no locked rooms. No whispers of fear. He still woke, sometimes shaking from dreams, alarms, footsteps, cold rooms, but then he would breathe. Look around and remember, he was free. Elena's fate was unknown. But Daniel kept her hope alive by living the life she wanted for him. Every step forward was a promise. Your courage was not wasted. Raphael taught him how to ride buses, how to speak for himself, how to trust slowly, like healing one afternoon. Daniel walked past the playground and saw children laughing, wild, unafraid, loud. He watched them for a long moment, something warm blooming in his chest. Then, for the first time in years, Daniel smiled, not a small smile, a real one. He joined them, no longer a shadow, no longer a prisoner, no longer invisible, just a boy, alive, growing, becoming, a future wide as sky.